Transport Minister, Barbara Creecy, is heading to court for a declaratory order. This is over the controversial license card printing machine tender. This comes after an Auditor General's report into the awarding of this tender to the firm. It's called IDEMIA, requested by the Minister. Now, the AG's office identified a number of irregularities, including non-compliance with the supply chain management processes. Minister Creecy joins me now for a discussion on this. Minister, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. You went to the Auditor General for her to basically look into allegations of possible tender manipulations. She's come back to you with a report that says not everything was above board. Are you able to highlight the key parts for you where you feel that this now has to go to court?
Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and allow me to greet all your viewers. Yes, indeed, the Auditor General has found that this particular tender did not follow the appropriate tender scoring procedure, and also that there was inconsistency in the way in which the bid specifications were applied. Now, this is quite a technical issue, but essentially what the Auditor General is saying is that the department set a number of criteria against which they were going to measure the bids, and they didn't follow those criteria consistently. There were certain ambiguities in the criteria, so they used discretion. But there were also inconsistencies in the way in which they scored aspects of the tender. And furthermore, the Auditor General is of the opinion that the budget analysis that was done prior to this particular bid went out on tender was not adequate. And in fact, the amounts that were approved by Cabinet were not adequate and didn't use the right costing procedure. Yeah. So we're faced with quite a difficult situation. Section 81 of the Public Finance Management Act makes it an offence for an accounting officer to authorize spending where the Auditor General is indicating that there is irregularity. So we're in a catch-22 situation, and I have asked my officials to prepare documentation so that we should go to the High Court for a declaratory order that would assist us in understanding how do we proceed with this particular matter.
Ideally, it sounds to me, Minister, that you would prefer that this tender be cancelled, but you may have to pay some cancellation costs. Is that ultimately your biggest fear?
I think that my biggest fear is that Section 81 of the Public Finance Management Act makes expenditure on irregular expenditure illegal. Now, this particular bid hasn't yet been operationalized. We haven't yet spent any money, but were we to do so, we would start to incur irregular expenditure. And because this bid has a very long lifespan over several years, it would mean that we would be racking up this irregular expenditure year after year. Now, this is not good financial practice. In the Public Finance Management Act, this can incur sanction against the accounting officer. So I think we do need to know from the High Court how we proceed.
You keep making reference, Minister, and I can't ignore that. You keep making reference to the accounting officer who is your DG. Is he in agreement with you here that this matter ought to go to court? But at the same time, what does he have to say about the processes here that were not above board? Because he ultimately has to answer to this.
Well, I think that at the moment we have an acting Director General in our department. The former Director General left at the end of February. So I can't speak for what was in his mind at that time, but the current acting Director General has drawn my attention to Section 81, as I've mentioned, and that's why we think we are not in a position to take a decision because the award was already made. So we now need to go to the court so that the court must guide us what we should do with regard to this particular situation.
In the meantime, people are going to be asking when it is that they can get their license cards printed. Is there an interim measure?
Look, I'm very concerned that we have an existing backlog, and to deal with that backlog, we are giving temporary cards. I think it's common knowledge that the existing machine is very old. Obviously, we are trying to enhance maintenance efforts so that it can resume printing. But I have also requested the acting DG to look at interim solutions. And I hope that once he has done the necessary work, we should be in a position to announce what those interim solutions would be while we try to find a satisfactory outcome with regard to the long-term solution.
Yeah. Minister, the company in question, the understanding is that this is a French multinational company. Has there been communication between yourselves as a department with this company as to their attitude at this time?
Well, I think that's something that is in the purview of the acting Director General. He did indicate to me that he had had correspondence from them on what was the current status, and I'm assuming that he will be responding to that correspondence.
And do you find it difficult that a multinational company, a French company, to be specific, was appointed for this job as opposed to a local company? Because this is part of what clearly the Auditor General had to look into, why it is that a South African company was not or could not be successful.
Well, what the Auditor General told me, because that was one of the questions that had arisen in the public domain at the time of this appointment, so I asked him to comment on that. And he did indicate that the bid didn't receive responses from appropriately qualified South African companies, and that the competing bidders were other multinationals that may or may not have had head offices in South Africa. So I think this was a bid that was being competed amongst different multinational companies, presumably because there isn't a local company that would meet the bid specifications.
Yeah. Then finally, Minister, on a completely different subject matter, this morning, in fact, in the early hours, a tragic accident occurred in the Free State. 10 people have lost their lives. Are you any clear at this hour as to what could have caused that accident? And once again, this is something that you are now having to comment on coming from the December period. What is it that can be done differently, you think?
So allow me to begin by expressing my condolences to the families and the loved ones of the people who were very tragically killed in this accident. And of course, taking the opportunity to wish a speedy recovery to those who are injured and are currently in hospital. As you know, the bus involved was a bus belonging to PRASA, one of our entities. So we have an interest in ensuring that we get a full assessment as to what caused this accident. And of course, PRASA would then be in a situation where they would have to be taking the necessary decisions. But I think we were all, I did receive the news very early this morning. We were all extremely shocked. And I think that it's definitely not the kind of accident that we would want to see at any time of the year on our roads.
Finally, Minister, it does seem in the Western Cape that there is disquiet, almost a brewing war between traffic officials and the taxi industry. You would have seen the videos circulating and the city officials commenting there. Are you worried about the state of affairs in the Western Cape, Cape Town to be specific?
Well, I have, in fact, I think it was, I can't remember now whether it was early in February or at the end of January, I had an opportunity to meet the Mayor of Cape Town, the MMC of Mobility, and also the MEC of Transport in the Western Cape. It was a very cordial meeting. We were discussing matters relating to passenger rail, but I did also raise with them in that meeting concerns about low-level conflict between law enforcement officers and the taxi industry. Let me be clear that where there are transgressions, either of the licensing environment or, of course, of road traffic regulations, we do expect our officers to take the necessary steps. But I think that we always have to be mindful about the way in which we take those steps. And I think it's a constant source of debate in our country, how law enforcement officers conduct themselves. And I suppose this is why there has been a decision taken that certain officers should be wearing body cameras so that there can't be these kind of disputes about who did what when somebody is pulled over.
Minister Barbara Creecy, I thank you very much for your time and indulging us on the two different subject matters we've engaged you on. Thank you very much for your time.